All right. We have the beginnings of a persistence implementation of our Club DB, and I wanted to see on Blackboard, when did I set the Club DB project due date? Has it been passed? It's today. Okay, because it may be easier to take some things from Club DB as we finish up our JPA, but I didn't want to take things which I was making you finish up. So anyway, we'll leave that. JPA, I guess, will probably be, I don't think we'll finish it tonight because we don't have enough time in each class. So we've got one more class period next week, and then no meeting on the 9th because the class ahead of you is taking their final exam. But that'll probably be the due date for the JPA, and then the final project is due the 13th. So, but I'm going to do most of the JPA project with you, so that I'm letting you focus primarily on the final project. Okay. Let's see where we were. We have a member object which has been made an entity. There's our annotations for the entity. And we have a member DB which can obtain a member object from our entity manager with a find operation. And then we have a club logon servlet, which at this point was just indicating whether we found or didn't find the member. So let me go back to the logon servlet and see if we can't get ourselves moving ahead here. And that's assuming that I brought it with me, which I might not have because I might have thought we were already past that. Oh, hold on. Well, I've got something here. Okay, so let's see. In the current version of the logon servlet, we pull the user ID. We try to find the member ID, or the member object by the ID, using our new member DB process. And if the member is not null, so if it's null, we're going to say no member record retrieved. But if we have a success on our member DB call, we're going to change this code now so that the password attempt is pulled from the form. So I have it as password ATT. Oh, did I not declare variables for this? I thought I did. User ID, I didn't declare a password attempt. Okay, so I'll declare it up here just in case. We're making that, I think, a long. I'll just call it pass ATT. All right, so pass ATT will be equal to a long, parse long of the request get parameter for password. And we can trim that before we parse it. Okay. And so we will, now that we have our M object as a result of the JPA, we will do a set password attempt. So set pass attempt for pass ATT, and then we will be able to tell whether we are authenticated. So if M is not authenticated, so I'll put a not there. If we're not authenticated, and this code is basically stuff we've done before, message is unable to authenticate, and that will send us back. Otherwise, our URL changes to the member screen, JSP, and we will put the member object on the session because we're headed that way. So request get session, set attribute, and I have in these notes M as my object name and M as my member as well. Okay, otherwise we've crashed out with an exception of some kind. We'll just indicate that. We'll put message on the request object, and we'll forward ourselves to wherever, whoops, I always do that, wherever the URL is now pointing. Okay. I think that finishes up our servlet. That doesn't really add any more JPA work, but we're at least ready to now think about the member update, which is our next bit of JPA. And so I'm going to grab from my ClubDB, I did have member screen JSP, which does have M. So I'm going to my old project, grabbing member screen, copy, paste into the web pages area of the JPA, because it will be the same. So now I'm looking at member screen JSP from the JPA project, which is going to fill up our member data and have a form with the member update action. So we're ready to think about a member update process, which is going to be handled by JPA largely. Let me see if I want to go ahead and copy from my old project. Member servlet. Yeah, actually I think there's probably enough useful code there that I'll go ahead and copy that as well. So I'm taking my member update servlet from, oh, but you know what? If we don't create a new servlet, we won't get the web XML update. So we can copy that as well. Okay, so I'm going to take from my old ClubDB, going to copy member update servlet, bring it down into servlets. And then in the web XML for the old ClubDB, I've got a servlet, member update servlet, and actually I've got a servlet mapping. Unfortunately, they're not together. So I'll have to copy this twice. So Control C, the member update servlet designation. And then the URL, so I'll go back to web XML and take the servlet mapping out of that web XML and put it down here. Okay, so we've got the servlet copied through an error after I copied it. We'll have to see what that's all about. But we've also got the web XML updated, so the member update servlet is recognizable. It'll take over on a member update action call. And we'll start through our member update servlet to see what it didn't like and what we need to change. So in this instance, we are not needing the connection string goodies because that's all being handled by the JPA. So I'm going to take out those, and that will definitely throw some more errors into my form. But we are expecting member to be on the session as attribute M. So I do have in my code here the same idea where new member, member M, and we create new member with the fields from M, and then we look at the editable data from the form. So I'm going to, in a try-catch, well, the whole thing's in a try-catch. I'm going to try and pull the last name, and it can't be empty. And then I'm going to pull the first name, which can't be empty, setting it into my new member. Then let's see, middle name is a modifiable field, so that stays the same. Status. Status is not really a modifiable field, so I'm actually going to leave it this way. New password is modifiable. Member date is not really modifiable. So, but member date has now been changed. I'm surprised it's not. Well, let's see. Member date. Do I want to allow them to change member date? No, not yet, I don't think. We'll play with dates in a little while. So we'll just leave it at this. I have continued for remaining fields, but these I'm going to not worry about on this project since they're not really changeable. Okay, so we're going to come down to our previous code that was, here we go, let's try, oh, it was member date that was throwing the error because it's not a set, it's not a string any longer in the get member date. But in fact, this whole bit of code is going to go away. So we've got the new object. I am going to click and drag all the way down to my else clause here. Whoops, let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to use the commenting out there. However, I actually do still need interesting. Interesting. Okay. Wait a minute. Sorry, I've got to look at this. This code is not making sense to me right now. So let me pause for a minute and take a look at this. All right. So we have new member that we've been creating, and if we come down, I've commented out all this code where we do the update ourselves. But let's, with the same idea, if message is empty, then we believe that we have an updatable object. So I'm going to set M equal to new member, because as far as, I mean, that's our primary object. And I'm now going to attempt to update it using JPA by asking for member. Actually, let's have message. I'm going to use message again. A message string equal member db update UPDT member, sending it the M object. But I don't have that method in my member DB. I do need to import member DB from business. And now it says, hey, wait a minute, you can't do this. So, member DB. How are we going to update in a JPA fashion? Well, it actually turns out to be pretty easy. We are going to create a new static method. So public static string, because I'm returning an error message if something happens. Update member, and it receives a member object M. Okay. I'm going to create string message, set it to the empty string, and now we need to have our entity manager do its thing. So I'm going to just copy this code, entity manager EM equals factory create entity manager. So copy that down into our update. And in the try catch, we're going to start with a transaction, because now on an update, we want the JPA will manage transactions for us if we're trying to update multiple tables with the same object. We're not getting that fancy in this at this point in this project. In fact, we won't. But in any event, you always want to do it with a transaction. So we're going to have an entity transaction trans equals an em dot get transaction, and I think we need an import for that. Yeah, persistence entity transaction, and that's so it can be rolled back if you're I don't know if I finished my thought. If we're updating multiple tables and one of them fails, then it'll roll back the whole attempt. So entity manager transaction, and then we're going to have a begin on the transaction object, and we will try to merge. So EM, Entity Manager, merge operation, and the merge is M. That's if you're working with an existing. So we're only updating a member that we assume is an existing member that we is already being managed by the JPA. So we're going to merge that member object back into the database, and if all goes well, we're still in the try block, we can do a trans commit. So we can commit that transaction, and our message will just be member, we'll add in the m.getMemberID updated. And I guess I'll put, I'll go ahead and put breaks. I'm assuming that that'll go out to the JSP page. Okay, but if we catch an exception, E, on that, then we have some sort of error that's occurred. It either occurred in trying to start the entity transaction, it occurred in the merge, something else. So we're just going to have a general message that says error on member update, and I'll add in the e.getMessage. Okay. And we need to do a trans rollback. Oh, it's not going to let me. That's interesting. So it won't let me do it because it was created in the try. Huh. All right. Well, that's the way I have it in my notes, but I didn't think that was right either. It's not recognizing the entity transaction. So let's bring this, at least this line, out there. Okay, now I think it's okay. Let's see if it likes that. All right. So we'll declare the transaction before the try-catch. We'll do a begin, a merge, a commit, or if we have catch an exception, we'll do a rollback. Okay, and then there's a finally clause here because you always want to close your entity manager as we did in the find that's up above. And then we're going to return message as our informational string coming back to the user. Okay. So in the update servlet now, it should be happy. Yep, it's happy with the update member call, but it's also a possibility that if member, oh, you know what? Am I in a? I'm not in a try-catch, am I? Or yes, I am. I am in a try-catch. Okay, so that's what I was seeing. So I did start this whole process with a try-catch, and I'm doing the if still in the try-catch. So let me. So that will actually, if for some reason the entity manager can't be created, then I can catch the exception. It'll be thrown back from the member DB class. It'll be thrown back to the servlet. So let me put those in. So I've got a possibility of catching a SQL exception. I don't know if it's a, well, we'll just catch a general exception. here. So if something fails, it could be a SQL exception, but I'm not sure the system would recognize it as being possible. So we'll just set message plus equal update error, and we'll do e.getMessage. Okay. But let's go back to thinking about our attempt to update the members. So if the message starts with error, then we know that the transaction was rolled back, which means that the updates that we put in the member object didn't take. So if message starts with, in fact we could do starts with, let's see, I wanted to do, I guess just error. We know it's coming back as error. Starts with error. Then update failed must reacquire member. I guess acquire is ACQ. So what I need to do is set mem equal to m equal to member DB find, but I'm actually finding by sending the member ID back to the method. So if it failed, an error came back, then the changes I made inside new mem are not valid, and I am going to reset mem by finding it again, and then the last step is to reset the m object. So I'm going to do a request. Either way, request get session set attribute m. Yeah, now it's happy. Okay. So we think through it again, and this is just a JPA merge call. We think data is good, we put it into M. We try to update M. If we've returned an error, then we have to reread M, because we don't know what data is there any longer. Or M was successful, so it's what we've got is correct, and we're going to update the M attribute on our session. Okay. I think we're finally ready to give it a try. URL is always a return to the member update screen or member screen, so that's good. I've got some variables I'm no longer using, but that's okay. And I'll clean and build. See if problems go away. All right, that looks good. Let me open up my SQL command line as well. So this is club, so I'm going to use club. And I'm going to select star from TBL members just to see some data. All right, so I've still got Nancy Zimmerman, Z005. I changed the middle initial to Q. So we'll see what happens here. I'm going to run the app. Z005. Password was 299, I believe. And we crashed. Well, that's not too good. Oh, really? Okay. Something I just copied in didn't have the JSTL with it. Ah, okay. Let me. So the member screen must have. Oh, that's right. We've got the if block on the JSTL, so I haven't added that into this project yet. So down into the libraries, right-click, add a library. The library is JSTL. And we will clean and build again. And I don't like, what browser am I running here? Properties, run, display, IDE's default browser. Let's change to Firefox. I prefer that one, even though I've got some session issues because I've got it loaded. I prefer that. Okay, let's try this one. We'll run again. Z05, 299. Okay, there's our data. I will change the middle initial on Nancy Zimmerman, or I'll attempt to. We've got a problem with the member date, but we're not doing anything with it. That's our display issue. Let's update member data. It says member Z005 was updated, which would be the merge call. Let's see if I rerun TBL members, and there you go. So Nancy Zimmerman was updated. So we've now done a call for the JPA to do an update to a data record. And the other thing I want to change here is on my member screen that I copied in from the old, I have added on the member date, my member get method is now, what, member date S, I think. Let's double check that. We've got a member date get mem. Oh, that's weird. I put a capital D when I hadn't done it in the others. Get mem DTS, which will display the proper date. So let's put that in. The way I have it, it's capital D, lowercase t, and then capital S. So now my member date should display properly on my member screen. Let's make sure that happens. And that's looking better. If we change a password, I'm going to make it 199. That's good enough. It does still take us back to the club DB because our member object is no longer authenticated. So if we try 199, does that get us back? Yep, that seems to get us back. All right. So that wasn't too rough to have a new JPA call for a transaction process to update the member. All good? Okay. Now let's think about moving into the purchases screen. So this is going to be a little different because we're going to have we have a purchase object, I believe. Do we have one from? Oh, I don't have one from my my old Club DB. I need a purchase object, And, well, it's okay. While I'm here, I'll go ahead and build it. But what's different now is that if they ask for a view of the transactions, so we want to do a show purchases, we need to have the JPA understand that purchase object is an entity, so we want that, but we want to be able to obtain a list of purchase objects based on a member that's been selected. So I'm going to go ahead in my business class and as quickly as I can create a purchase object. So I'm going to right click and create a new Java class called purchase, and I'll do the annotations as we go. All right, so purchase has, and there's going to be an interesting issue here with the description, the purchase description, because that actually comes from the third table, the TBL codes table. So we're going to have this as, first of all, as an entity, so at entity, and the table that it runs is TBL purchases. So we'll need to do imports for all of that. So entity, Java persistence entity object, and then Java persistence table annotation. So the purchase will first of all have a purchase ID. So this is again a little different because if we describe TBL purchases, TBL purchase club, TBL purchase, show tables. Purchases. What did I misspelled? Purchases. Okay, that was my problem. Let's describe TBL purchases. Purchases. Okay. It's getting late. I can't manage it. So there's an ID, which is an auto increment primary key. Big int is the way the table was defined in MySQL. And so you're going to have to tell the JPA that this is your primary key, and furthermore that essentially the database is managing it, that's the identity field. So we're going to do it as follows. We're going to have we're going to have a private long, because it's a big int in the database, PID, there's your purchase ID field. But the annotations are going to be that this is the ID and that the column name that it matches is ID. So let's do imports for the persistence items for that. But you're also going to indicate that this is a generated value, and generated values have strategies, and the strategy for this generated value is generation type of identity. I should have done an import and then I get my generation type. So we're going to generated value, we'll do the import for that, Java persistence generated value, and then the generation type will be identity, so we'll do an import for generation type. And so that's telling the JPA processes that essentially that the database is managing that object and that it's an identity field in the database. So the rest should be fairly straightforward. We're going to have a private string for member ID. Every purchase has the member, and the column for that is memID. Again, I don't think that the upper and lowercase matter too much. Then we're going to have a private date for the purchase date. So we're switching this over to a date type, and that is a Java util date, not a SQL date. So Java util date, and that will take our column mapping. So the name is purchase date, but it also requires that temporal. So temporal annotation, and the temporal type is date. So we'll do 2 imports for that. Persistence temporal, and then persistence temporal type. So now we have purchase date in play. Trans type, so this is a private string trans type, and the column mapping is to trans type in the database. Transcode, private string TCD for transcode, and that maps to the transcode column in the database. Then we have an amount of the transaction, so that's a private double AMT, and at column mapping of amount. Okay. Now I'm also going to have a currency formatter. Well, I can leave that out. Let's see if we create a public purchase constructor that just sets everything to default values. Purchase date to null, trans type to the empty string, TCD, empty string, and then amount to 0 and the purchase ID to 0 as well. Okay. We should now be able to refactor and get all of our gets and sets for these fields. So let's right-click on our purchase.java, refactor to encapsulate fields. Start with all, select all, and then see if there's anything I need to take out. We want purchase ID, member date, member ID, purchase date, trans type, code, and amount. Oh, and I didn't check to see whether I got all the fields. Purchase ID, member ID, purchase date, trans type, code, and amount. I think that is all the fields. All right, so sets and gets for all of those. I don't care for the Java doc, so we'll refactor. All right. So now we have a class that is full, in a sense. We might still want to do for our purchase date, since the JPA is managing it as a date back and forth, but we probably want to have a readable entry. So I'm going to go like I did with member. I'm going to go create a public string get perch date s, and I will use a we can actually do it in one command. We can return a new simple date format, and then the date format is MMDDYYYY using So you put that in. Well, actually, let's do it this way. So your simple date format of that, then you can have your dot and go on to the next line because you're going to format this dot purchase date. And we should be okay as long as we do the import for the simple date format from the text package. All right, so we've got a get for the purchase date S, and this is interesting. I actually have a get amount. Well, we'll leave that. We'll leave that the way it is for the moment. So I have a formatted get amount field as well. Okay, our purchase object, ready to go. But we want, or we'll need, a purchase DB class to do the same kind of database transaction management that member DB was doing. And the first thing is to do a get, but as I say, it's a get of a list of objects. So in your business package, we're going to create a new class, new Java class, which is purchase DB, and purchase DB will have all of our fun entity manager stuff in it. And so the get here is going to use the persistence query tools. And this gets a little confusing because the query using the persistence query language, the JPQL, Java persistence query language, is not the same as SQL. So you're not writing SQL, you're writing JPA queries, which are turned into SQL by the JPA libraries or the tools. So we're going to have a public static method that returns a list of purchase type objects, and I'm going to call it get purchases. But in order to do its job, it's going to need to know the string for the member ID of the purchases that it's looking for to match. We're going to have an import for the list, Java util list. And then we're going to need our entity manager. Oops, excuse me, entity manager EM equals DB utility dot get entity manager factory, and on the factory create entity manager. So that's just as before. Add the import for the entity manager from persistence. But here's something that's now different. So we're going to have a string QS query string, and it looks like this. We want to select P from purchase P, but again, this is not SQL, it's JPA query language. So what we're really saying is select from the purchase objects. So the P here refers to the purchase class objects, where P.memID equals memID. So in other words, find from the collection of purchase objects that you've read, that you're going to read from the database, find those that have member ID matching the string that came in, and we can do a little order by. We can order by P.purchase date, but those again are the fields that we have. So mem ID is the field mem ID. Purchase date is the field perch DT. All right. Then we can use, and this is a part of the Eclipse link, Hibernate does it in a slightly different way, which you're welcome to come back for the fall's frameworks class, and we'll play with Hibernate mostly. Anyway, typed query purchase Q. In other words, we're going to have a typed query that returns purchase type objects. And it will equal the EM create query. So the entity manager will create the query, and the query will be created there we go, using the QS string we just wrote and the result class, which is purchase.class. So we're saying, all right, this typed query must return objects of purchase class type based on the select JPA query string, and we do need to do an import for the typed query. So we're, oh, and then of course we have, ooh, I've made a mistake. Ooh, this is bad. Okay. This typed query actually has a parameter. It should have been colon memID in the where clause. So where p.memID, this is like a prepared statement, the typed query. So colon memID, that's your parameter. And so after the typed query, then we're going to say, all right, Q, our typed query, let's set the parameter. And the parameter is the memID inside the query. So this memID here refers to the colon memID. It'll be a drop-in for the parameter. And what are we dropping in? We're dropping in the string that came in from our method call. Okay, so we've got a typed parameter. Now we're getting close. We're ready to try to build a list object. So let's have a list of purchases, P, and we'll set it equal to null to start. And then in a try-catch, we will set P equal to the typed query, and it has a get. It has things like get single result, get result list. This is obviously a list. So we are going to get the result list, in other words, all items that match when the query runs. So this is a JPA process. But if P is still null or P is empty, and the author talks about this, that it's a good idea to test both, depending on your platform, I think. But anyway, we test them in that order, so we set it to null. If it comes still as null, or if it's considered empty, then we're going to make sure that it returns as a null. But we hope it's got a bunch of purchase objects in it. And we can catch a no result exception is one possibility on this kind of a query call. So we'll do an import for the persistence no result exception, and that will set P to null as well. We don't have a return message because we're hoping to return a list, so if anything happens, we just have to return it as null. And then the finally, of course, is to close the entity manager. But when we're done, we return P, which we expect to be a list of purchase objects. So I think I have just enough time to run the or to create the show purchases servlet at least to a point to see if we get any values back. Okay, what doesn't it like about my purchase DB? I think it's okay. I'm going to clean and build. I think the red will go away. All right. So let's create a show purchases servlet. So right click, new servlet, show purchases servlet. We'll add our descriptor information and take out the URL pattern with the word servlet. Show purchases is what I had before. Okay, and all I want to do here for the moment is try to read purchases using the JPA. So I'm going to simplify my code down to that. String URL, I'm going to go back to the member screen JSP and just use the messaging that's there. So we'll have one more week on work here, but in a try-catch, I'm going to have a member object M, which comes off of the session. Get the attribute. The attribute is M. And need some imports, or an import, come on, there we go, business.member. After I have M, I'm not going to worry about the date at all, of course. I'm just going to go straight to my attempt to read the purchases. So I will need, let's create up here a list object, a list of purchase objects P. So that's two more imports for business purchase and for Java utility list. So there's my P, and I should be able to just have P, the purchases, equal purchase DB dot get purchases, sending it M dot get member ID. And then I want to create a message string. Oh, I guess I'll have to build that. String message equal empty string. And if P is null, returns as null, then my message is purchases list return null. Otherwise, I'm just going to set my message to purchases list add p dot size entries. Okay. I'm going to go back to my member update servlet. Oh, I guess I need to catch an exception E, which doesn't make much sense here because we'll just put message servlet exception E dot get message plus our little break line, our HTML break line. But the dispatcher can come from the member update servlet. So let me go grab the last three lines to set the message attribute and to dispatch. So Control C into the show purchases servlet. Pop that in. And that should at least tell us whether our purchase DB JPA code is returning a list and what size list. Let's take a quick, well, I'll do a run clean and build here. Make sure it builds. All right. And then if I do a select star from TBL purchases where mem ID is equal to A043, I'll go with the top one. We have 19 records that we're expecting. And let's run it, see where we get. So A043, I think, has an 18 password. There's our member. If we try to view transactions, purchases list had 19 entries. So we got the data back from our JPA call, and it had the right size. And that is so lovely, since I didn't have many minutes left. But there you go. There's your first look at a JP query. JPQL as they call it, the JP query language query. Returning, and so it's got a typed query is your prepared statement equivalent, and it returns a list, which is either null or has values. We probably ought to test by deleting out all of the purchases for one member and testing that, but I'm out of time. So next week we will finish up the purchases, show purchases servlet, because we want to move ahead to the display of the purchases for that particular member. And that's going to give us an interesting little issue, because the purchase object as it is right now does not have the description in it. The description that we want to show on the display page is in the TBL codes file. So if we describe TBL codes, we have to get the description, the transaction description, from the transcode. And so now we've got two tables which are linked, and we're going to let the JPA handle that link and manage the process to make that work. But I think we're getting close. All right, thanks very much.